50% of the children of Guatemala, they are suffering because they don't have enough food. Dozens of babies die every day in the mountains because they don't have milk. The mothers won't bring it down because they don't have the money. So we go look for the babies. All we can do in Guatemala is to pray to God. Pray that somebody will say, here we are, we want to help you. And that's what will help us.
World Help works in a lot of different ways. Of course, one of the most important things we're doing is the baby rescues, which is literally a life and death issue, and we're able to meet that need in an incredible way. Most people don't know that over 1 billion people lack access to clean water, and so much of the sickness and disease around the world, especially here in Guatemala, is coming from contaminated water.
We're losing lives up in the mountains. When they come down here, when we bring them down, there's hope for life. We received a phone call. They told us a baby is dying in the mountain. Can you do something?
The little girl that's waiting, do you know why she's sick?
No food and no water. The water is very contaminated.
How much time do we have?
But in reality, we should have been there 2 months ago.
Yeah.
But now, we just got 6 hours to reach there and 6 hours to come back. ¿Qué tiempo tiene estar enferma?
Mes tiene.
¿Y tiene bastante leche todavía para darle, ya no?
Pues ahorita ella no mama.
Ella va a estar bien, ¿eh? Vamos a trabajar, vamos a ver los doctores. Va a estar bien. She's gonna be okay.
What's her name?
¿Cómo se llama?
Blanca Olivia.
Blanca Olivia.
Beautiful. These people live in extreme poverty. They don't have food, they don't have clean water. The water works sometimes, it doesn't work sometimes. Even when it does work, it's still dirty. I realized how desperate the situation was and that she really could have been hours away from dying.
When we come down with Blanca from the mountains, we didn't come down just with Blanca. There were 9 more kids. We will never say no. No matter how many they are, we'll take them down to our rescue center. She's got high fever. She can't wait. We have to go now. Dale, vamos.
Carlos has done such a great job here at Hope of Life. He loves his people, and we just wanted to come alongside and work with him.
Le damos los medicamentos ahorita para la fiebre, la vamos a desparasitar, ¿verdad? Y darle suerito y su fórmula.
One of the uniquenesses of World Help is that we work directly with national partners like Carlos Vargas, who's already doing a great job, already has a good track record, and he just needs a partner to help with resources to do even more.
Just this year alone, we rescued almost 1,000 babies. The need is greater now than ever. Every day we go up in the mountains. Usually we come down with 4, 5, up to 10 babies.
We could come anytime, any day, and we'd find babies to rescue. There's that many of them. The reality is, these babies are dying because of a lack of clean water. I'm hoping that we can do more, that we can go back to some of these same villages where we've rescued these children, and we can provide them with some type of clean water source so the children will not continue to get sick.
Doing good.
Doing really good.
Ya la bañamos. Acérquese.
There she is. The greatest thing that we can do is restore hope. That's what we're doing in everything World Help does. We're bringing hope to people who have no other hope.
So join with me in welcoming Liberty alumnus and God's baby rescuer, Noel Brewer Yeatts.
Johnny, thank you so much for allowing me to be here this morning. I have to admit, when I walked out up here on the stage, I got a little teary-eyed because looking out at you, I am proud to call myself a Liberty grad, and I am proud to be here with you this morning. It is an honor, and just thank you for letting me take a few minutes to share my heart with you. That video that you just saw was life-changing for me. I was able to experience what it's like to save a life, literally save a life. And I was just with Blanca and her mother last month, and it was so nice to see her laughing and playing and smiling, just like any other normal little girl. But she had something this time that she didn't have before. She had hope. And it's stories like Blanca that are why I'm the person standing in front of you today. It is why I've dedicated my life to traveling the world with World Help, trying to restore hope to as many people as I can. But you know, sometimes I find myself thinking about Blanca's mother, who, like so many other mothers around the world, simply did not have the resources to feed her child. And being unable to save her child from the effects of malnutrition and dirty water was never the choice she wanted to make. That was not her choice. I met another young girl whose choices had been taken away in Rwanda. She lived in a village full of child-headed households. No parents, just children raising children. Josie Ann had lost just about everything in the genocide. Her father had been killed, her mother had been raped and infected with HIV, and became pregnant. After her mother delivered that baby, she soon became sick and died, and Josie Ann, at the age of 15, was left to mother her two younger sisters. She struggled to feed them and clothe them, and especially to find medicine for the youngest sister, who was also born HIV positive. I asked Josie Ann, what are your dreams and your goals for your life? And all she could tell me was that her one dream in life was to raise her sisters so that they could grow up and start families of their own. That was her dream. She bore the burdens of a woman twice her age. But before I left Rwanda, I visited the Genocide Museum, and if you've been there, the atrocities described there are just almost too much to take, especially the things that happened to the children. And I remember there was this wall with all of these pictures of children who had died during the genocide, and listed next to their pictures were their names and their ages, their hobbies, what they liked to do in life, and then at the very end it listed how they died. I could barely read the words. Smashed against a building, macheted in their mother's arms, stabbed in the eyes. It was unimaginable. And just when I thought I couldn't take anymore, I turned the corner to walk out, and I saw this little plaque on the wall with a simple little quote on it. It was by an unknown child affected by the genocide, and it simply said, "I didn't make myself an orphan. I didn't make myself an orphan." And it hit me that Josie Ann was an orphan, not by choice, and a mother, not by choice. And you know, Blanca's mother and Josie Ann, they may not have had choices in their life in those situations, but meeting them showed me
that I do have a choice. I can choose to sit back and ignore the injustices happening all around me every day, or I can choose to live my life awake enough to make a difference. And you see, whether it's here at Liberty or on the other side of the world on a mission trip, I believe that everyone's journey to waking up starts somewhere. And God had to teach me that if I wanted to change the world, I had to start by being willing to change myself. I met a mother and her young daughter in Guatemala in a village that literally had nothing. There was no clinic, no school, no clean water, no food, really no houses, just kind of makeshift houses held up by sticks and tarp. And I was there with a group that day, and as I saw this mother walking towards me, I could just sense the desperation in their eyes. I knew something was terribly wrong. And I soon found out that this beautiful 9-year-old girl standing in front of me named Margarita had been raped. And she had been so brutally raped that her intestines were protruding from her body. Her mother pulled down her skirt just enough gently so that I could see the bandages and the drainage bag from the 2 surgeries she had already had to have to correct that problem. And I remember looking around thinking, how has this little girl survived? This village has nothing. How has she kept her wounds clean? How has she had water to take her medicine? How has she survived? And I looked up at that mother, and she was clenching this Ziploc bag, and in it was all of her daughter's medical paperwork up to that point, just trying to show, I've been a good mom. I've done all I can to help my daughter. But Margarita needed one more surgery, and she was out of resources. She had nowhere else to go. She had no hope. Now, I know some people, when they hear this story, may quickly say, wow, that mother was smart. She knew that there was a group of Americans in her village that day, and she was going to take advantage of that situation. But I never saw it that way. She was just being a mom. And as a mom myself, I can so relate, because if my child was in need, I would do whatever it took to help them. And I just found myself overcome with the unfairness of it all. This little girl had done nothing. She had had her innocence stripped away from her, and she was out of hope simply because she was poor, simply because she was born in a part of the world that is overcome with poverty and destitution. And it just didn't sit well with me. It wasn't right. I read a quote that says, "Let us be the ones to say that we do not accept that a child dies every 3 seconds simply because they don't have the drugs that you and I have. Let us be the ones to say that we are not satisfied that your place of birth determines your right to life. Let us be outraged. Let us be loud, and let us be bold." Now, I wish that I could say that some great pastor or some great man or woman of faith said those words, but I can't. Those words were spoken by an actor named Brad Pitt. And I certainly don't know Brad Pitt, and I don't claim to know what he believes, but I do know this. I know what we claim to believe. And sometimes I wish, as people of faith, that when we saw the injustice in our world, I wish that we were outraged. I wish that we were loud and wanted to be bold about it. But too often, we just get overwhelmed. It's uncomfortable to be bold. It's much easier just to be numb, to forget the unimaginable circumstances happening all around the world. War, conflict, disease, genocide, famine. That's just not part of our everyday life. And I've written about this tension extensively in my book, but I have to be honest and tell you that I struggle with it every time I step off the plane. So it's going to take more work. It's going to take us being willing to step out of our comfort zone to a world that desperately needs Christ followers on the front lines. My family was able to provide that surgery, that last surgery that Margarita needed. The doctor said that they had to completely rebuild her insides to make things right. The group that was with us was able to build her a home, and now she has someplace safe and healthy to live. Her life has been transformed. But if we really want to transform lives, we have to be willing to allow ourselves to be outraged, loud, and bold. Bold enough to be changed ourselves and bold enough to act. When my dad was working here at Liberty, he took a group of students one summer to Brazil, and my family was able to join him that summer, and we were in Rio, and every day we would set up on what was called the boat docks, and it was this place where people traveled on ferries to and from work, and about every 45 minutes, literally hundreds, if not thousands of people were just kind of dumped onto the boat docks. And so we would set up our equipment there, and the students would sing, the Liberty students would sing Christian music in Portuguese and draw a crowd, and my dad would give a gospel presentation, and my sister and I, our job was to kind of mingle through the crowd and pass out Christian literature. So one day as we were doing this, we stumbled across this little boy. He was 5 years old, and his name was Nildo. And I don't know if you can see the picture that they're getting ready to put up, but I wanted to pause right here once they show it and just maybe let you absorb this picture for a minute. It's funny because normally when I share this story, I tell people, well, you remember how it was in the 80s, but it hit me, you don't remember what it was like in the 80s. So you're just gonna have to trust me that it was a bad decade for hair, fashion, just about everything. So if you can get past that and focus on Nildo, this was the day we met this little boy, the exact moment. As you can see, all he was wearing was a torn pair of underwear. We found out that he was a street child. His father had abandoned him. His mother was just too poor to take care of him. He was literally just living on the streets all alone. Well, we immediately fell in love with him, and we spent the whole day with him. We went down to the nearest shopping mall, and we bought him some lunch, and he ate like he had never eaten before. And then we went and let him pick out some clothes, and he picked out a bright yellow jogging suit and brand new Nike tennis shoes. And I remember I didn't want to put those shoes on him because he was so dirty, so I took him to the bathroom, and I set him up on the counter, and I remember washing his little feet. And I noticed that his feet were deformed because he had been roaming the streets his whole life without shoes. And when I slipped those new shoes on his feet, he stuck his foot out and said, "Shoes, shoes, shoes," over and over again in Portuguese because he had never had a pair of shoes before. Well, we spent the whole day with him, never really thinking what we were going to do at the end of the day. And when it came time to pack everything up and all the chaos, we found ourselves on the bus with the group pulling off, and there was little Nildo just waving goodbye. Well, the whole group had fallen in love with him, and on the ride back to the hotel, my sister and I kept bugging my dad saying, "We have to do something for Nildo. We can't leave him there. We have to find a way to help him." And my dad made a few phone calls and found out that there was a Christian children's home nearby that was willing to take him in, and the cost would only be about $400 a year. So when we got back to the hotel, he pulled the students together, gave them the good news, and he literally just took the hat off of his head and passed it around for a collection. Well, you guys know, there was college students, and it was the end of the trip. Nobody had that much money left, maybe a little bit for souvenirs and a snack. And while we were doing this, there was a Brazilian pastor with us, and he had been working with us, nice man, well-meaning. But when he saw what we were doing, he leaned over and he said, "Why are you going to all this trouble to help this one little boy? Do you have any idea how many street children there are in the country of Brazil? There is no way that you can help them all." And you know, I've always looked back at that moment as a moment that God taught me such an important lesson, because that pastor was right. I couldn't help all the street children in Brazil. But that's not what God was asking me to do. God put one little boy in my path, and I could make a difference for him. And when that hat was finished being passed around, there was $800, enough to pay for 2 years to take care of Nildo. We were so happy to go back the next day and share the good news for him. We went right back to where we had found him the day before, but he wasn't there. And we looked and looked for what seemed like hours, and when we finally found him, his clothes were gone, his new shoes were gone. The older street children were so jealous of the attention that he had received that they beat him up and took everything. So we knew this time it was going to take more than just new clothes and new shoes to make a lasting difference in Nildo's life. We asked him if he wanted to go to the children's home, and of course, he said yes. And that day when we left, Nildo was with us. There's so much more I could tell you. You can read Nildo's whole story in my book, but this is what I wanted you to hear. Today, Nildo is a grown man. He's become a Christ follower. He works in a children's home helping kids just like he was. A few years ago, he was able to come to the States as a chaperone for our children's choir. And when I see that picture of him, that grown-up man, all I can see is the 5-year-old little boy. And I can't help but wonder what his life would have been like had we not met that day. But as I've gotten older, I've started to wonder something else. What would my life have been like had we not met that day? And maybe I was the lucky one. Mother Teresa once said, "If I look at the masses, I will never act. But if I look at the one, I will." Nildo's story has stayed with me my whole life. It's why I do what I do. I dedicated my whole book to him. It was a pivotal moment in my life to learn that lesson, one person at a time. And it helps me fight that temptation of simply just getting overwhelmed by the needs of the world. Nildo taught me to see the one. You know, over the years, I have traveled with my dad all over the world. And on every trip, he has challenged me to pray a special prayer, to break my heart with the things that break the heart of God. And God has used everything I have seen to answer that prayer. He has never failed to answer that prayer. But I also think he's used those experiences to help me pray a new prayer. Or maybe I should say, answer my own prayer. Because it is easy to get overwhelmed by the needs of the world. And it's also easy to blame it on God. To cry out to God and say, "God, why do you allow this to happen? Why do you allow innocent children to suffer? Why do you allow people to die just because they don't have food and water? Why?" And sometimes I think God is calmly but sternly looking back down at us and saying, "Why do you allow it to happen?" Because I believe that God, in all of his mystery, has chosen to use us to meet the needs of the world. That's his plan. And he doesn't have another one. And even though I don't always understand it, I do believe it. Shane Claiborne, in his book, Becoming the Answer to Our Prayers, says it like this: "That's the beautiful mystery. We have a God who chooses to need us. We have a God who doesn't want to change the world without us. We have a God who longs to cooperate with us, to allow us to fail and flounder, and who promises to make up for our shortcomings, but nonetheless wants us." It's the story of our faith. So when we see a problem like the starving masses, is the answer God or is the answer us? We think Jesus would answer yes. The answer is both. You know, there's something exceptional about Liberty students. We don't just come here to earn a degree. No, we come here to use our degree and our education to make a difference in the world. And I love seeing that Restore Rwanda video that we're doing together and the incredible things that you're doing there. And I also wanted to show you a few pictures of another project we're partnering together on in Zimbabwe. LU grad Albert Mavunga is working in Zimbabwe ministering to nearly 500 orphans. World Help is finding sponsors for these children, and you've come alongside to provide a clean water well and a chicken farm that will continue his ministry there. I wish I had more time to tell you about those projects, but since I don't, I've created a special LU link that I want you to go to later, noelyates.com/LU, and there's a whole photo gallery there of those projects, as well as a place for you to view the full-length version of that baby rescue documentary that I showed you a short portion of. We have a booth up here tonight, or this morning, to answer some of your questions about what I've talked about, but if you come to the meeting tonight, we have an incredible interactive baby rescue experience that we would love to share with you. But it's just incredible what you are already doing, the impact Liberty is already making around the world. But in order to make that kind of impact, in order to make that kind of difference, you have to be willing to take a risk. You have to be willing to step beyond what you know and open your eyes to a hurting world. And that's exactly what I want to ask you to do this year. Going on one of Liberty's dozens of mission trips is the perfect way to start. I went on one every year that I was here to places like Brazil, Hong Kong, China, Eastern Europe. They were defining moments in my life. They shaped my life, and they helped God confirm his plan for my life, and I know they will do the same for you. Through many of those trips, and many trips since, I've seen my fair share of pain and suffering around the world, and if you go, you will too. But God has used those experiences to start to teach me something interesting about my relationship with God, because I claim, probably like many of you, to want a deep and powerful relationship with God. I say I want to know everything about him. But I started to realize that maybe what I really want is a God who knows everything about me, who answers my prayers, who listens to my hopes and dreams, who takes care of my family, and basically a God who just keeps me relatively safe, comfortable, and happy. That's kind of what I want. And the pain and suffering in the remote parts of the world, God can keep that to himself. Just keep me safe in my world. But the truth is, if we want a deep and powerful relationship with God, we have to love everything about him, not just the pretty stuff and the easy stuff. The Bible tells us that God is with the poor. He's a father to the fatherless. He's a defender of widows. He identifies with the least of these. And if we want a relationship with him, we have to learn to love like he does. Ephesians 5 tells us how to do that. It says, watch what God does and then you do it, like children who learn proper behavior from their parents. Mostly what God does is love you. Keep company with him and learn a life of love. Observe how Christ loved us. His love was not cautious, but extravagant. He didn't love in order to get something from us, but to give everything of himself to us. Love like that. Despite all I have seen around the world, I've come to believe this. The greatest injustice of all is not poverty, it's not hunger, it's not disease, it's not the lack of clean water or medical care, it's not the lack of education, abuse, abandonment, trafficking, slavery. As bad as all those are, the worst injustice of all is hopelessness. So I can't think of any better way for us to respond to the needs of the world than to dedicate our life to restoring hope. One day, in one person, at a time. Live your life fully awake. Let God break your heart, and then when He does, let Him use you to change the world. Thank you.